Kawhi Leonard is the definition of a silent assassin. He's a player that won't even flinch as he drops a really efficient 35 on your favorite team while clamping their best player. He has multiple championships, multiple finals MVPs, and has risen up the all-time rankings. But one season in particular really put him on the map and truly made him an all-time great in my eyes and the eyes of many. That season was 2019. In 2019, Kawhi Leonard joined the Raptors as a one-year mercenary. That season, he would set new career highs in basically every stat category, while the Raptors would finish as the second seed in the Eastern Conference, power through an incredibly difficult East playoff run, and take down the back-to-back NBA champion Golden State Warriors in 6 games, bringing the city of Toronto its first NBA title and ending a streak of heartbreaking playoff defeats. It was a special season, but honestly, my description here really doesn't do it justice. This Raptors team, and especially their playoff run, was historic. Guys like Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, and Pascal Siakam stepped up in a big way, but Kawhi Leonard stepped up in a way unlike anything we've ever seen before. His 2019 playoff performance set records and will go down in history as one of the greatest of all time. Let's talk about it. Before we get to the playoffs, let's talk about how Kawhi ended up in Toronto in the first place. Leonard was drafted in 2013 by the Indiana Pacers, who then traded him to the Spurs for George Hill, an awful move that robbed us of seeing a Kawhi and Paul George duo. Wonder what that would have looked like. But in San Antonio, Kawhi was immediately put around all-time talents like Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and of course, Coach Greg Popovich. Who knows if the Claw would have become the player he ended up becoming in Indiana. Regardless, he immediately became a contributor on a team that was consistently in championship conversations. By his second season, he was playing in his first NBA Finals and tasked with guarding LeBron James. The Spurs would lose in 7 games in one of the craziest finals of all time. That included this moment. But the Spurs would bounce back and return to the finals the next season for a rematch versus Miami, where Kawhi would truly burst onto the scene. In these finals, he would average 17.8 points per game, 6.4 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.6 steals, and 1.2 blocks, while shooting a scorching 61.2% from the field and almost 58% from 3. San Antonio would dominate the series, winning in just 5 games, and the Claw's dominant play would earn him Finals MVP at just 22 years old, tying him with teammate Tim Duncan as the second youngest player to ever receive the award, only behind Magic Johnson. Leonard hadn't even been an all-star in his career, and now he had received one of the greatest honors in the sport. The Spurs as a team wouldn't reach these heights again, with them suffering a first-round exit the following season, a second-round exit in 2016 despite winning 67 games, and a conference finals loss in 2017. But Kawhi Leonard was rapidly ascending himself. In 2016, he would average 21.2 points per game, 6.8 rebounds, and 2.6 assists, making his first All-Star game, making All-NBA first team, and winning Defensive Player of the Year, all at the age of just 24 years old. Then in 2017 at 25, he would become an MVP caliber player, averaging 25.5 points per game, 5.8 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1.8 steals on 48.5, 38-88 splits, making another All-NBA first team, winning another Defensive Player of the Year, and finishing third in MVP voting behind Russell Westbrook and James Harden. He became the unquestioned leader of the squad and brought San Antonio back to the conference finals. This is where a disaster did end up striking. Earlier in the playoffs, Kawhi had suffered an ankle sprain in Game 5 of the Spurs' second-round series versus Houston. Despite this, he was able to tough through it to play in Game 1 against the seemingly unbeatable Golden State Warriors, led of course by Steph, Klay, KD, and Draymond Green. The Spurs completely dominated the first half though, leading by 20 points at halftime, behind 18 from Leonard and 17 from LaMarcus Aldridge. They pushed this lead to 21 in the third, and then the incident happened. Zaza Pachulia stepped into Kawhi's landing space on a 3-point jumper, re-injuring his ankle and putting him out for the rest of the playoffs. This moment would change NBA landing space rules forever. There's been debate about whether or not this was intentional, but what we do know is that it marked the beginning of the end for Leonard's tenure with the franchise. The following offseason, Kawhi suffered a quad injury that would keep him out of the preseason games and regular season opener. He had no timetable for return, as Pop commented in November that the rehab was coming along slower than expected. Kawhi eventually returned in early December, but struggled and didn't play back-to-back games. By mid-January, he was out again indefinitely. Rumors began to circulate that this was causing tension within the Spurs locker room. Reports came out that Kawhi had been cleared to play, but didn't believe he was ready, seeking other opinions and choosing not to play, something that his teammates really weren't happy about. He would miss the rest of the season, including the Spurs' first-round playoff matchup against the Dubs, and when the offseason rolled around due to all the drama, Kawhi Leonard would request a trade, which shook the league as Kawhi was a top 5 player just entering his prime and seen as a guy that would probably be the next Spurs lifer. Meanwhile, the Toronto Raptors had just suffered a second-round sweep at the hands of LeBron James despite winning a franchise record 59 games. It was clear they needed to make a massive shift. So, on July 18, 2018, the Spurs dealt Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green to the Toronto Raptors for franchise legend DeMar DeRozan, Jakob Poeltl, and a first-round pick. This probably seems like a small return for a top 5 player like Kawhi, which it was, but part of that was due to the fact that Kawhi was set to become a free agent after the year. The Raptors, in search of an overhaul, decided to take a huge risk, a risk that would pay off incredibly. The 2019 regular season was just what the Raptors hoped for. Despite his recent injuries, Kawhi looked like the best version of himself right out the gate. He averaged a career-high 26.6 points per game, 7.3 rebounds, 3.3 assists, and 1.8 steals on 49.6% shooting, 37.1% from 3, and 85.4% from the line, making All-NBA second team and All-Defensive second team over the course of the season. Meanwhile, Pascal Siakam emerged as a legit second option, winning Most Improved Player as he averaged 16.9 points per game. Kyle Lowry did what he had done for years, Danny Green slotted seamlessly into the starting lineup, Fred VanVleet burst onto the scene after going undrafted a few years prior, and Toronto solidified themselves defensively by picking up Serge Ibaka the season before and dealing Jonas Valanciunas for Marc Gasol at the deadline. They finished as the second seed in the conference with 58 wins, just 2 games back of the MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Milwaukee Bucks. Then came the playoffs. In the first round, the Raptors matched up against the 7th-seeded Magic, who would win Game 1 behind a DJ Augustin 3 with 3 seconds left. Maybe in another timeline, the Magic used this momentum to go on the greatest championship run of all time, solidifying DJ Augustin as the GOAT point guard. But that's not this timeline. Kawhi would eviscerate the opposition, averaging 27.8 points per game, 6.6 rebounds, and 3 assists on 55.6, 53.8, and 89.3 splits in a 5-game gentleman's sweep of Orlando. This was a sign of things to come and a warning to the rest of the Eastern Conference. Round 2, though, brought a much tougher matchup, the Philadelphia 76ers. The Sixers had bought into their young duo of Simmons and Embiid earlier in the year, adding Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris over the course of the season, as well as JJ Redick in the offseason, giving them an absolutely stacked starting 5. But Toronto was ready for the challenge. In Game 1, they'd win by 13 points despite all 5 Sixers starters scoring in double digits. This was due primarily to 29 points from Pascal Siakam, only surpassed by a 45 bomb from Kawhi Leonard, where he shot 70%. Philly couldn't do anything to stop him, a statement that continued to be true. Over the next 5 games, Kawhi would average 31.4 points per game, 10 rebounds, and 4.6 assists on 54, 34.5, 84.1 splits as the two teams traded blows, setting up a Game 7 in Toronto, a game that would propel Kawhi's legacy into the stratosphere. Kawhi Leonard would end up dropping 41 points in a grueling low-scoring game. Toronto needed him and he stepped up big, but with 4 seconds left, Jimmy Butler hit a layup to tie the game at 90 apiece. First-year head coach Nick Nurse called a timeout to set up a play, and you know the rest.
By Simmons, is this the dagger?
This remains one of the greatest shots in NBA history. Leonard hit a fading mid-range jumper over the outstretched arm of a 7-footer in Joel Embiid. The ball bounced off the rim 5 times and left not a second on the game clock. It's the only Game 7 winning buzzer beater in NBA history. Because of this, Toronto is advancing to the conference finals for the second time in the last 5 years, setting up a battle with the first-seeded Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks jumped out to a 2-0 lead on the series despite back-to-back 31-point games from Kawhi Leonard. This was primarily due to the play of the MVP, as Giannis put up 24, 14, and 6 in Game 1 and 30, 17, and 5 in Game 2. Over these first 2 games, Kawhi hadn't spent much time guarding Antetokounmpo, which might surprise you, as Kawhi is one of the best wing defenders in the world. But Kawhi was carrying an immense load on the offensive end, and the Raptors needed his scoring. Putting him on Giannis would be tiring, jeopardizing his offensive output that they needed and that had carried them throughout the first couple series. But, according to Coach Phil Handy after the Game 2 loss, in one of the coldest moments of all time, Nick Nurse and the team were discussing adjustments in the locker room when Kawhi Leonard spoke up. He said, "The adjustment is, I'm guarding Giannis," and then he left the locker room. Giannis would average just 20.5 points a game for the rest of the series on 43.5% shooting as the Raptors stormed back to win the next 4 games in a row. Kawhi, while shutting down one of the most dominant players in recent NBA history, would average just under 30 points per game, 9.5 rebounds, 4.3 assists, and 2.2 steals on the series, completing Toronto's run through a very difficult Eastern Conference. Throughout the entire Eastern Conference run, he averaged 31.2, 8.8, 3.6, and 1.6 on 50.7, 38.8, 87.5 splits. It was one of the most dominant playoff stretches in NBA history, and we haven't even talked about the finals yet. The 2019 finals were a matchup of the Toronto Raptors and the back-to-back champion Golden State Warriors. However, this Warriors team was a bit banged up. Kevin Durant had suffered a calf injury in the second round versus Houston, and it was unclear when he'd return to the finals, if at all. But it was still the Golden State Warriors. Kawhi Leonard came to play though. In Game 1, he had 23-8-5 and a win. In Game 2, he had 34-14-3. In Game 3, he dropped 30. And in Game 4, he put up 36-12 on 50% shooting. Toronto was up 3-1, one game away from a title due to Kawhi's dominance. Heading into Game 5, it was announced that KD would return, and although the Dubs would end up winning the game, Kevin Durant would suffer an Achilles injury, which would ultimately keep him out for the entirety of the next season. Heading back to Golden State, the Warriors had a chance to force a Game 7, but Toronto wouldn't let it happen. Siakam, Lowry, Van Vliet, and Kawhi Leonard all put up over 20 points, and the Raptors were crowned NBA champions. Kawhi Leonard was, of course, awarded with the Finals MVP, as he averaged 28.5 points per game, 9.8 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 2 steals on 60.6 true shooting percentage, joining Kareem and LeBron James as the only players to win Finals MVP for 2 different franchises. This completed one of the greatest individual playoff runs of all time. The stats for his full run were 30.5 points per game, 9.1 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 1.7 steals on 62 true shooting percentage. Let's put this into some perspective. Kawhi Leonard became just the 6th player ever to put up 30 or more points per game on 60% true shooting or better over the course of a playoff run, joining Adrian Dantley, Bernard King, Alex English, Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, and LeBron James. Some pretty good names. However, not a single one of those players won a championship in those runs where they were putting up those numbers, making Kawhi Leonard the first champion to put up these stats. He joined Magic Johnson, Moses Malone, and KD as the only players to win Finals MVP in their first season with a team. In just one playoff run with Toronto, Kawhi Leonard now had 8 of the top 15 highest scoring playoff games in Toronto Raptors history. And that's the craziest part of it all. This was his one season in Toronto. He came to the organization, became the best player they'd ever had one of the most dominant playoff runs in NBA history, hit the only Game 7 buzzer-beating shot we've ever seen to clinch the series, locked up Giannis Antetokounmpo, brought them a title, and then dipped for LA. All in 1 year. It's probably the most Kawhi thing ever, the silent assassin becoming the greatest one-year mercenary in NBA history before teaming up with PG on the Clips. Kawhi has continued to be a Terminator in the playoffs and is widely regarded as one of the greatest playoff players in NBA history, and this is really where it started. The Clippers haven't won a title yet, but heading into this season, they are one of the championship favorites with a stacked roster, even though Kawhi Leonard is coming off of an ACL tear, because it's Kawhi Leonard. I wouldn't be surprised if he averaged a career-high 27 points on ridiculous efficiency this season before dropping 30 a game in the playoffs en route to the Clippers' first title and a 3rd Finals MVP for the Claw, because it kind of just seems like that's what he does. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton. Y'all's support has been incredible. We just hit 12K on the channel, and I can't thank y'all enough for that. Trying to keep giving y'all content as soon as I can and trying to keep making these videos that you guys have been loving, this new style. So I'm going to keep them coming out. Really excited for the regular season coming up in a little over a month. It is going to be a ton of awesome new content. I can't wait to get that out to y'all. But for right now, I appreciate y'all watching. Leave a like and subscribe, like I said, if you did enjoy. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.